Hey, this is David,
This is Chris.
and this is the Realtor Daddy podcast.
Yo, welcome back. So, what do
Chris,
we talk about?
how was this weekend, man? I think there's some big thing we gotta talk about.
Yeah, man. And while it was happening, we were texting each other,
Yeah.
and I was freaking out. But basically, Lay had a little scare, and I thought she was gonna lose her finger.
Oh man, tell me about it.
Yeah. So basically, I was sitting on my desk, and Yuki and Lay often come after she naps. But basically, there's a podcast mic on my desk. It's like a crane kind of thing. And when I was holding Lay, she was like touching things and everywhere. She loves touching everywhere.
As babies do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everywhere, everything, even dangerous things. But basically, what happened was her ring finger got smashed in between the crane. You know how like it's like a crane
Yeah.
and it moves up and down.
Mm.
The mic is super heavy, so any slight touch to it, it lowers the crane down, and she got pinched over here.
Oh.
And it was like literally stuck for a long time. So it was bleeding. We thought we smashed her bone, and she was crying. Like, that was the first time I've seen her cry like that. And even to the touch.
Yeah.
And dude, it was scary. It was scary.
I bet, man.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, I can sort of imagine the feelings,
Yeah.
but gosh, was she okay afterwards? Like, how's she doing now?
Yeah, she's okay now, thank God. Like the bone, I don't think it's been fractured, but basically what happened was because it pinched so hard under the nail, started bleeding a lot. We actually called the like Kaiser. We set up a phone appointment, and dude, this one made me feel like, man, the medical system, or maybe Kaiser, just in general, they're so freaking slow to be like urgent about things. And I was like, dude, we have an urgent like thing. We wanted to go to the ER actually, or urgent care at least, but then they're like, it was 5 p.m. that time, and they're like, the next appointment is at 7.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so good thing we didn't go, but like it would take 2 hours to wait for that, like while she's like crying, bleeding, and but like the next best thing was a phone appointment with our doctor,
Yeah.
and it was basically like an hour later. So we were just waiting while she was crying and going all crazy, and I was
Man.
like, dude, in Japan it would be like straight to the ER, and like we'd be accommodated. Yuki said that if it's babies especially, they just like clear out their schedule and like
Yeah.
accept it, like as
Man.
they should.
It's such a huge difference, the level of health care that you receive in a different country.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, but I'm glad Lei is okay. That must have been like really scary. I mean, can you kind of talk about like what emotions were kind of going through your
Dude.
through your head and
Yeah, there's a lot. So definitely the guilt, fear, anger,
yeah,
like what you described in the previous episode. Man, I felt it right there. Like during that time, I was like, dude, this is what David was feeling like. It was like almost like despair. Like I didn't have like I was angry with everything. Like
yeah,
just everything. Like I was angry at myself. I was angry at like the world.
yeah. Like, why is this podcast mic here? Who put this here?
Yeah, I know, dude. Dude, I was like, the fuck? I quit podcasting. Nah, just joking.
Oh man, no, I hear you, man, and I hope our viewers and our listeners don't think we're terrible parents. I
Yeah.
feel like, for the past 2 weeks, things have happened to our kids. But
Accidents.
I think that just kind of goes to show it's like it's gonna happen. And I think because we're a little more vocal about it and we're on this sort of platform, I mean, Chris and I want to be honest, and this is gonna happen to everybody. And like I said in the last podcast, and based on that redditor's comment, like shit happens, and there's two types of people, two types of parents in the world. It's the ones that admit that things happen to their children, and the ones that lie about things not happening to their kids.
Yeah, for
So,
real.
you know, Yeah, thanks for sharing, man.
Dude, there's just a lot of illogical fears. Like I thought she wouldn't be able to use her finger for like forever. And
I
like I
mean,
thought she'd yeah.
I understand that fear too. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I'm thinking if Parker got into that situation also, I think that'd be my first thought. It's like, are we gonna have to amputate that finger?
Yeah, that's what I
Is he
was
gonna be able to
thinking.
use it?
Yeah.
Like,
Like they're
man,
so fragile, dude. Like even a toddler's finger can't fit in there,
yeah,
but for some reason a baby's finger like fit in that tiny crevice of
man,
metal against metal. And
yeah.
dude, yeah, like you can really like it was hard because like the pull off was really hard because she like yanked it instead of like kept it there. So that's what
Oh,
was.
so as soon as it clamped down on her, she immediately just
Y-
reacted and pulled out.
It was like stuck in there because she couldn't pull it
Oh,
out.
okay.
But then like I was like fidgeting it for a little bit. So it was like a good 30 seconds to a
Yeah.
minute of like
Oh,
me fidgeting stuff. So it was like it's hard, dude. Like like yeah, it was hard to like even get it out there. How did she get it in? But
oh man.
yeah, it was a bunch of fears, but thank God the doctor was like even if it's fractured or broken, you can't really splinter it because the baby's bones are like just soft and you can't really do much about it. But
Yeah.
we can x-ray it. They were like really casual about it. They're like,
I
"Yeah, it's up to you if you want to x-ray it or not." I'm like, "What do you think? Like what do I do?" I wish I was like guided a little more, but like I was like, "Okay, let's just wait until the next morning to see if it's like swollen or something."
I think a lot of doctors and pediatricians end up doing that too. They're a little more casual about things, and I think a lot of it is just to not make us freak out as parents, because in that moment we're already really freaking
Dude,
out,
yeah,
right?
I can't even imagine.
So I feel like they just take that calmer tone and they're just super casual about it because they don't want to make us think the worst thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Even like 'cause it could be the worst thing to us, but to the doctors, it's like, oh, this is like the 10th call I got this week about,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
maybe it's something like that. But I hear you though. Like sometimes, especially when you call up our pediatrician too with a problem, it's like, I need you to be a little more sympathetic
Yeah,
to our
yeah, yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Like I
yeah.
need you to also have the same sense of urgency
Yeah.
that we are going through at the same time. you know?
Exactly, dude. I didn't sense any of this. Like,
Yeah.
it was like, oh, that's it.
But I mean, what they say is true though. Like I think a lot of times what our babies go through, there's really not that much that we can do to really help them.
Yeah.
We just kind of have to let them go through it, and they'll heal eventually, right? Unless it's like something super
Yeah.
serious, like
Like,
if
tore off her fingers.
yeah, if that I think that at that point they'd be like, holy shit, you come to the ER
Yeah,
right now,
yeah, yeah.
right?
But that
But
didn't happen, so.
yeah,
But definitely a lot of like illogical like imagination and like
yeah.
nuts, man.
Yeah,
That was scary.
you're not alone in feeling that too. Like even right now, it's been like I think a week and a half since
Dude,
Parker
yeah.
fell.
How is he?
He's fine, totally fine. But I still, in the back of my mind, I still worry like, hey, did we like hinder his development in some way? I always have this crazy like idea like, maybe in the future Parker is gonna discover the cure for cancer, and now that he has taken a tumble, he somehow lost that ability. Like it's
Uh,
completely illogical, and like really there is no basis for that kind of thinking. But you still can't shake that feeling.
yeah.
You know?
I 100% understand. Like
Yeah.
yours was a little more serious in a sense like my baby fell on the back of her head, but when it's like a serious emergency kind of situation, it's on a different level of worry, dude. Like
Yeah.
I understand.
I totally get it.
Yeah. But yeah, thank God she's okay. She's using her fingers. It's not swollen. I mean, there's still blood under the nail, but
Yeah.
it's fine.
Do you think the nail will kind of eventually fall off?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
So we understood the situation like a day after, like, okay, it's not swollen, it's not blue or like there's blood under it. Like, yeah, I just Googled a lot.
Oh, did you go on Reddit too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, dude. Apparently, fingers get pinched a lot. Babies' fingers get smashed a lot and
Oh
like
man.
broken and
Yet another worry and fear to add to the growing list of things that your baby will get into.
yeah, yeah. Even now, like I still feel guilty, but now it's like, okay, this is what being a parent feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think like you'll probably feel that way up until her finger like is completely healed. Like, once you see the blood is like gone and everything,
Yeah,
like it's gonna sort of be like a little bit of a reminder of what had happened to. And I felt the same way. Like Parker had like an abrasion on his chin when he fell,
yeah,
and I don't feel as guilty now because the abrasion's not there anymore. But like for those next couple of days that the abrasion was still there, and like he wasn't really eating that well either, I felt a ton of guilt. But
yeah,
now we're like, okay, it happened. We're gonna do our best to prevent it. But you sort of come to terms with it after a little while too.
yeah,
Like it just happened. You just move on.
yeah.
Yeah,
Part of being a parent.
yeah, it really is.
But is he like crawling normally, and is he at his normal self? Like no.
Yeah, he's his normal self now. Like completely just unaware that mom and dad failed him.
Oh no, dude.
Like, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
um, he's not really crawling yet though. We're still working on that. We're able to get him to a point where he can be on all fours,
yeah.
and he can actually lift his stomach up off the bed. And he can do that for a good 10 seconds at a time. But afterwards, he'll just kind of like fall. It just happens. Yeah.
Dude, on his own time, man.
Yeah, yeah,
He's growing.
I feel like he's like the laziest baby. He just prefers to just be laying on his stomach versus trying to, like, we'll put his favorite toys and stuff in front of him too to try to like encourage him to come towards
Yeah.
it and crawl a little bit, but he doesn't care. He's like, mom and dad are gonna give it to me anyway. Like, who are you kidding?
Sooner or later, he's gonna.
Yeah, it happens.
Well, yeah, man. I'm glad he's okay. I'm glad Lay's okay. But today, I wanted to talk about real estate, and
Yeah.
especially the beginning process of like buying a home. I'm on my journey as well, so hopefully this helps the audience out there. So what's the next step of going to a lender, for example?
That is
Let's
a
start
great
from there.
question. So shameless plug right here. Please, please, please download the no shame, no guilt, no judgment calculator that Chris and I created. We'll include the link in the description box below, but please download it. Again, full disclosure, we are not lenders, so don't hold the numbers to us. But the left-hand column, just punch in however much you make per month. Punch in your debts. Please be honest. Again, nobody's there to watch those numbers, so there's no judgment. Punch in your credit score and punch in your down payment amount in a dollar form. And then on the right-hand column, it'll spit out a number approximately of the price range that you should be looking into. I think that's a great first step, especially for us millennials out there. We don't like meeting with people that we don't have to meet with
Yeah.
just yet. So I think that's a great first step. Download that calculator, get a ballpark of what you're looking at. And if you want to really take it a step further and you feel like you're ready for it, I'd say the number one first step that you should do, and I kind of flip-flop between the two, it's either contact a realtor, contact your favorite realtor, or contact a lender. I personally kind of go on the side of like finding your favorite realtor first. There's 10,000 of us out here on the islands, so you're going to find one that you're going to vibe with. But contact a realtor. We work with lenders who give really great rates to our clients. We're not going to set you up with somebody that's not going to be able to help our clients get the best rates. We want to work with the lenders that have, minimal closing costs, great rates, good customer service. So really, if you want to have like a cheat code into that first step, just reach out to a realtor and we'll be able to link you up with a lender that we like to work with, that's going to give you the best rates, minimal fees. I think that's a
awesome.
solid first step there.
Nice. Okay, so when you reach out to a realtor, I guess it's like an hour session of like, okay, how much do you make, and Just basically similar to what that approval calculator has.
A little bit, yeah. I think a good realtor, and again, we're not licensed to do this kind of stuff, but I think the general public expects us to know all these things, so we sort of become a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
But a good realtor will be able to have conversations with you and sort of figure out a ballpark of what price range we should be looking at. So for our listeners out there right now, um, just to kind of give you an idea of what the financing will look like, for every $100,000 that you borrow at today's current interest rates, you're looking at about a payment of maybe $650 per 100,000 that's borrowed.
That's good to know. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
So you can do the math like really quickly, and that doesn't include any like, it doesn't take into account your down payment, what your actual rate will be, because that will fluctuate depending on your credit score. But just to give you like a really rough ballpark, every 100,000 it's going to cost you about $650, give or take.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so
Um,
cool.
but yeah, once you meet with your realtor, they'll. I think the first thing they'll do is probably link you up with a lender too. But we'll also try to help you figure out, what your goals are in real estate. Whether you're looking to buy something, sell something, what your home is going to look like. We're going to help you figure out what your wants and needs are, and hopefully try to keep it a little more realistic too. I think one of the shortfalls that happens with a lot of these meetings is realtors don't set the expectation correctly,
Okay.
at the very beginning. They sort of let the client kind of take off and go into dreamland and think, oh, yeah, I'm going to be able to buy my dream home. Often that's not the case for a lot of like Hawaii families, right? We sort of have to start small and then work our way up to that dream home. So a good realtor is going to be able to help you and guide you through that entire process. Um, and in step number two, uh, they'll have you talk to a lender, and those lenders are going to ask for basically three different documents. And the first one is going to be 2 years of tax returns.
Okay.
You're going to also need 2 months of bank statements because they're going to want to source where all the down payment and stuff is coming from. They also want to make sure you're not doing any kind of money laundering. So really any kind of like big deposits and stuff that you're making into it, they want to source where that's coming from.
Okay.
And then lastly, 2 of your last pay stubs. And really, any other income that you're receiving, you want to make sure you disclose that as well because they want to try to help you max out what you can be pre-approved for.
Interesting. Okay. My imagination was they just look at your financial picture for one whole year. This is like my illogical imagination. So meaning or being that they only look at 2 months, that's cool. I thought they like tear you up like give me your pay stubs, give me your bank information.
I mean, some lenders may dig a little further if they
Uh-huh.
do notice like kind of sort of suspicious activity,
Okay.
or I think also depending on the type of career you have, they may dig a little bit further.
I see.
I can say from the realtor perspective, because we're being paid on commission, they do dig a little bit further, and I
Like a
think especially
year.
after COVID, yeah,
Oh,
and especially after COVID too, a lot of the lending restrictions they got a little bit tighter. So especially for people who are self-employed, they do dig a little bit more. Whereas like if you have a normal W-2 kind of 9 to 5 job, what I listed earlier is going to be totally sufficient for them to spit out a number for you. And of course, you'll have to fill out an application too. The lender can do either a soft pull or a hard pull on your credit. One thing I would like to mention too, when these lenders pull your credit, it doesn't necessarily affect your credit score too much. Um, these types of pulls, the credit bureaus don't really consider them when it's for like a mortgage.
okay.
So I would also recommend like perhaps shopping around a little bit on your rate and working with other lenders too to see who's getting like a better deal.
Hmm.
And that's just to kind of look out for the buyers at the end of the day too.
I see. Is there like a certain company that you suggest, or is it just there's many that you just need to compare and shop around?
That's a great question. So I am of the mindset that you should try to work with a mortgage broker
Yeah.
versus like a brick and mortar bank
Oh,
loan officer.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
And the reason why I feel that way is mortgage brokers, they have a little more flexibility in the products that they can offer.
Mm,
And oftentimes, mortgage brokers, because they're going to be self employed, like how you and I are,
yeah.
they don't have as much overheads oftentimes. So their fees generally speaking, are going to be a little bit lower, a little more
Oh,
favorable to the client,
that's good.
right? Whereas if you go with a brick and mortar bank, and I'm not saying brick and mortar banks are terrible, we do oftentimes go to brick and mortars for certain loan products too, right? But because they have, physical locations, they have employees they need to pay. What I've noticed a lot of times is their fees tend to be a little bit higher.
Mm.
They may offer a lower rate, but you also have to kind of look at the fine print too and figure out, hey, is this lower rate because I have to pay a certain amount of points to
Oh.
obtain that lower rate? Wherever you decide to go to, I think my number one piece of advice is, on top of shopping to maybe like two or three different lenders, ask them for a loan estimate. That way they can kind of lay out what their fees will look like at any given like purchase price. But don't look into those loan estimates like too much though. Like, lenders do have the ability to adjust those fees and stuff that show up on there. So they might give you like a really low loan estimate with like really low fees. But once you get into the process of actually applying for it and you start to get the final statements in,
Mm-hmm.
you'll notice that those fees might be double or triple sometimes whatever they quoted you at the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Things to look out for.
Yeah, definitely things to look out for. But yeah, I
Wow.
think that'd be my number one advice. Talk to a couple of lenders, get some estimates too. And just from like the lender perspective too, if you're going to be talking to different lenders, try to do it in the same day.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that is because rates fluctuate every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to shop a different lender, and if you talk to lender A today and then you talk to lender B tomorrow, the rate may have fluctuated by like a
Oh.
quarter of a point. And if that happens, lender B might give you a better loan estimate just because the rate had dropped. But then if you didn't give lender A another chance to sort of match that or beat it, you'll never know, right?
Oh, I
So you
see.
want to make sure that if you're going to shop, talk to the lenders in the same day so they can give you the same um, estimates as much as possible.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, okay. So basically you're doing market research on the same day
Yeah.
so that it's like the same factors that are affecting
Yeah, yeah.
it.
You want to compare apples to apples, right? Not apples to oranges. So,
Yeah.
kind of the same thing. You want to make sure that you contact them the same day, give them the same criteria
Hmm.
to work off of.
Interesting. Okay, so in the loan process, I know a lot of people got messed up with things called ARMs or adjustable rate mortgages.
Yeah.
Is that something you would like not absolutely not, or is there different
It really
strategies?
depends on the situation that the specific buyer is in. ARMs are great products, but they do come with some risk, right? Um, and for our audience who is listening or watching, ARMs, they'll lock you in at a certain rate for like a period of time. Afterwards, it adjusts to whatever the market rate is. That's why
Yeah.
it's called an adjustable rate mortgage, right? So it can be good for people who are sort of looking for like maybe like a bridge loan type of thing.
Like
ARMs, I think, are a little bit easier to get. Are sorry, they're not easier to get, but they are like riskier of a product, and
mhm.
it's kind of for people who are sort of in like a riskier type of real estate, maybe. But it's also available to like your like typical consumer too.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend ARMs though. I think especially where the economy's kind of headed, and we just really don't know. I don't think it's like quite the best product out there.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not a lender, so don't hold me to this.
Yeah, that covers you.
Yeah,
Okay,
but I think the very common loan is going to be a 30-year fixed mortgage.
okay. What are some questions that are good to ask lenders?
I think a good question to ask, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the realtor that you work with too, is like how many loans have they closed this year?
Oh,
Because you
okay.
want to make sure that you're working with somebody who is up to date with the current market. There are new products coming to market all the time in terms of loans too. And you want to make sure you're working with a lender who is up to date with all their products, you
Yeah.
know. And the cool thing about working with a mortgage broker too is they have access to like hundreds, if not thousands, of different loan products that are out there.
Hmm.
Whereas if you work with a brick and mortar bank, they're a little more limited to what they can offer a client. So
Yeah.
sometimes If you go to brick and mortar bank, they might reject you based on your specific situation. But if you go to a mortgage broker, they might be able to find your product that, hey, it might be a slightly higher interest rate, but they can still get you the home. Right? So there's some more flexibility there.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, I'd say number one question is like ask them how many loans have they closed this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think another one too, and this goes for realtors in general. What is their preferred method of communication too? Um, I can say good lenders, really, really good lenders out there, they are going to be busy, and it's because they are good. So a busy lender might not be able to pick up your phone call all the time. They might not be able to text back immediately.
Yeah.
But a good lender should be able to at least respond to you within a 24-hour period. Unless it's like a really pressing matter, then they'll get to you right away. But good lenders out there are going to be very busy people.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you have to schedule it in advance all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. But good lenders also, they'll have team members to kind of help them. Loan coordinators, like, you know, lower loan officers or
Mm-hmm.
just people on their team. They'll be able to kind of help pick up the slack.
That's awesome, man. Okay, so in this loan process, how long do you think this will take? Do they send you to a class? Is that mandatory? Like the first home buyer? Is that like a okay, I did
It
this step and
depends.
then this?
Yeah, I know some of my clients in the past, they have had to attend first-time home buyer classes.
Yeah.
And that's put on from like the lending institution. And a lot of it is just because you're a first-time home buyer, they want you to make sure that you understand that if you don't pay back your mortgage, you're gonna get foreclosed on, and it's a huge impact on your credit score.
Yeah.
So the bulk of those classes kind of focus on that, but they also kind of teach you like how to budget your finances properly. They also kind of walk you through a little bit, not super detailed, about what the loan process looks like and what the borrowing process looks like too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, but not every lender is gonna make you go through a class, I don't think. But I think it is in your best interest to kind of go to one anyway, just to figure it out.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I talked to the realtor, I talked to the lender. They found me a good product. They shopped around. What's the next step? The actual search, or when do I sign a buyer's representation? Do I
Oh,
have to?
that is a great question, man.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked that. So, due to the recent NAR settlement, and I believe the settlement date was August 17th, if I remember correctly. But now, if you want to work with a realtor as a buyer, you will have to sign a buyer's representation agreement. And what that buyer's representation agreement states is the length of time that this particular realtor will be representing you in all forms of real estate, and how much you will be compensating that realtor for the time that they have been able to give you for their services that they render for you.
Mm-hmm.
And the length of time that these agreements can go on for, it's really up to you and the realtor that you're working with. I've seen some, as a broker in charge of the company, agreements that go for 5 years at a time.
Oh
I've seen
wow.
some that go for even one day, right? So these have a lot of flexibility. But in order for you as a consumer, as a buyer, if you want to see a house and you want a realtor to represent you,
Mm-hmm.
you have to fill out this form, and then they can actually start to go ahead and schedule the homes for you, and they can take you in their car and then open up those doors for you. If you do not sign something like that, the realtor cannot help you.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, but that's not to say, like, as a normal consumer, you're more than welcome to go to an open house. That's totally fine. But the moment you want somebody to represent you, you'll have to fill that out. And I would like to just do a full disclosure here. I know a lot of buyers are a little freaked out about it
Yeah.
when they sign these buyer's representation agreements. And a lot of it is because it is saying that the buyer is on the hook for a certain percentage of compensation to the realtor. But this is only like a worst case scenario. And that it really only happens when the sellers are no longer offering some sort of compensation to the buyer's agent,
Oh, I see.
right? But 99% of sellers out there, they understand in order to get their home sold, they do offer some sort of compensation to the realtor because
Yeah.
they themselves have benefited from that type of system when they purchased the home. They didn't have to pay for their agent too.
Mm-hmm.
So 99% of sellers out there are still offering compensation. So really, you don't have to worry about it too much. Again, it's just like a last resort kind of thing. If the seller isn't paying for it, then you may be on the hook and responsible to compensate your realtor for their time.
It's good to know because maybe people who aren't familiar with the real estate process, they'll think, oh, I have to pay commissions, but it's actually coming from the seller
Yeah,
most of the time.
yeah. Which, I mean, we can kind of, it gets really technical too, but technically it kind of comes from the buyer
Oh, because
anyway,
it's their money.
because they're the one borrowing the money to pay to the seller, who will then give it to the buyer's agent. So it still
That
comes from
makes
the buyer
sense.
anyway.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a very common like misconception. It's they think it's coming from the seller, but ultimately it comes from the buyer at the end of the day
Yeah.
because they're the ones who have to secure the loan to give to the seller.
Okay.
Generally speaking, closing costs are going to be 1.5 to 2% of whatever the loan amount is.
Okay.
So you also want to budget that when you are looking at homes on top of the down
Yeah.
payment. Those buyer's representation agreements, your realtor will probably have you sign that when you guys meet.
What is the third step of the buying process?
So the third step in the buying process is going to be kind of working. This will kind of coincide with like you meeting your realtor. It's sort of determining what your next home is going to look like, right? So after you sort of figured out where your finances are, you'll work with your realtor to sort of figure out what your needs and wants are going to be for this next home that you're going to be living in,
Yeah.
right? So like let's just say for example, if you are going to be starting a family soon, maybe you'll want something like a 2 bedroom. That way the parents can live in one room and then the second bedroom will be for baby once they grow up a little bit, right? It'll give you a little bit more room. Or if you already have a kid and you're planning for another one, maybe you look for like a 3 bedroom, right? You also want to take into account things like commute. Commute is a really big one, right? Oftentimes, homes on the west side are going to be cheaper, but if you're working in town, you have to factor in like an hour, hour and a half commute
Yeah.
to and from work every single day. And it's a lot of
Traffic.
time to be spending in traffic, right? So you want to take that into account. You want to take into account the kind of lifestyle you're looking at too. If you like being really close to the water or at least within a 10-minute drive, maybe you don't want to be living in like Mililani. That's going to be more than 10 minutes to get you to the water, right?
Yeah.
So you want to factor those in, and a good realtor is going to be able to help you out and sift through that kind of information to help you determine what's going to be the best fit for you. So you'll work on that, and you can do showings afterwards too.
Okay.
So the realtor is going to help you schedule private showings for you. I also highly encourage that you go out to open houses. Try to go with your realtor too. It's a little bit better that way, but oftentimes, again, a good realtor is going to be busy, so maybe they might not be able to attend open house showings with you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always good to have a realtor there too, because they can kind of help point out things that you should look at. I think with the buying process, it's a very emotional process. There's a lot of feelings involved as well. So having a realtor to sort of guide you, they'll be able to help you figure out and sift through all those feelings and sort of keep you like grounded, right? They'll come in it with the criteria. You can come in with the emotions, right? That's totally fine. You figure out if you actually like the home or not. But as a realtor, we'll help you decide if this is the right home for you. We'll point out like, hey, we do see some issues here. There's cracks in the foundation, or this drywall looks like it's kind of shifting a little bit, or oh, I see termite droppings, things like that. That's the kind of like expertise that we kind of come in with as a realtor.
Yeah. Basically, you are serving the client, and you exist because it's a difficult process. There's so many things that can go wrong, and
Yeah.
your expertise, your knowledge, you're kind of filtering everything. And
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the public has a misconception of us realtors, especially for buyers agents out there, like the realtors that represent buyers. A lot of the public think that we just exist to open doors, right? But
really,
it's really not the case. There's
yeah,
there's a myriad of duties that we have to accomplish, and it's really interesting. Like I actually have a lot of clients who are attorneys,
yeah,
and attorneys, legally, because they are lawyers, they pass the bar, they have a license and to do all this, they can legally engage in real estate transactions. They don't need to take an extra class or anything for it.
Oh, serious? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But these clients of mine who are attorneys, they use me, right? They have me represent them, and it's for a few reasons, right? They're too damn busy
Mm-hmm.
to do it on their own,
Yeah.
right? And if you're just doing it as like a once in a lifetime kind of thing, I mean, the purchase contract is 14 pages long in its most basic form, right? And if it's not something that you do on the daily, you're not going to know how to fill out that contract,
Exactly.
and you're not going to know what the timeline looks like too, and it's going to really mess things up. You don't know
Yeah.
what to say, you don't know what type of information that you're allowed to disclose,
Mm-hmm.
or you might over disclose something that will shoot you in the foot.
Yeah.
So really, there's a lot of things that the buyer's agents have to kind of balance, and that we kind of work in the behind the scenes to make a transaction go smoothly.
So I've been in uh, real estate on the investment side for about almost 3 years. And when I studied, that's when I realized, whoa, there's a lot of things that I don't know, even if I'm in real estate.
Yeah.
So imagine like a consumer who doesn't know anything about, dude, it'll just fly over their head. And like I was on the investment side using different contracts,
Yeah.
using different processes and instruments, but like it's completely different. That's why you need a realtor, like especially a good one who understands the contracts. Like David was just training me on contracts maybe about a month ago, and it took a few weeks to even go through it. Like there's so many intricacies of like things that can happen, timelines, inspections, and like dude, it just flew over my head, and that's why you need a realtor. By the way, David, maybe he can still do it now, but he memorized the purchase and sale contract. What it was it called? Hawaii Board of Realtors contract.
Yeah, the standard purchase contract
My
for
God.
Hawaii. I can't do it now, but at the very beginning of like my first year of real estate, really didn't have that many clients, so I took it upon myself to just learn the contract. And at one point, I could recite it word for word,
Without looking.
without looking.
That's amazing.
I can't do it now because the contract has gone through so many revisions, but I still know what every single paragraph talks about,
Yeah.
and I know the contract inside and out. So really, when I think this is also a good question to ask the realtors
Yeah.
when you're interviewing realtors is how well you know the contract.
Wow.
There are many realtors out there that do not know how the contract works. And there are other realtors out there who think they're attorneys and they try to amend the contract in ways where we really shouldn't be doing. But it's very funny, just the spectrum of knowledge that realtors kind of have. You know, there's some that's like you kind of question, should you be a realtor?
Oh no.
You know, and then there are others like, hey, this guy's really good. He knows what he's talking about. I hope I can be on the side of like, hey, David's good. He knows what he's doing.
Dude, like when we were doing training for it, there's just so many things that you can do to make it beneficial for the buyer. That's so cool. Like it's like ninja stuff that I didn't even think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of like really good reasoning as to why we write a contract a certain way. And a lot of it is really just custom tailored to the client's specific situation, right? Just like every house too, no two clients are the same. So you can't just have a realtor that is just using a template and just shooting them out and hoping that it'll get accepted. Every house
Yeah.
is different. Every seller has different motivations for selling
Yeah.
too. And every buyer has different wants and needs and criteria for their homes. So I personally would also work only with a realtor that is going to sit there and write up a custom contract for you. I don't want to
Yeah.
see a realtor that pulls up a template,
Yeah.
and templates are great too. And this is more from like the technical realtor behind the scenes aspect, but templates leads to a lot of corrections that have to be made. And as a broker in charge for a real broker, I see a lot of that happening. Agents will send me something that I can tell very clearly it's done from a template because it just doesn't make sense for their specific client or for this
Oh,
specific home or the specific closing timeline that they're looking at. So
that's interesting.
yeah, really interesting stuff. But yeah.
So there are two realtors, one on the buyer side, one on the seller side. And would you say that each realtor is trying to get an advantage over the other one, or is it just like explain to me this game. Like, are you always working together? Are you always trying to? Well, you're working on the best interests of your client. That's the main thing,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's a great question. So I think from both sides, as a listing realtor and a buyer's realtor, we will both have the same goal of trying to close on this house,
Yeah.
right? Because at the end of the day, and I'm going to be real transparent here, we want to get paid,
Yeah,
right? We're
yeah.
not working for free here,
That's true.
so our goal is always to get into closing. So the listing agent, on top of finding the right buyer, we also will consider the agent who is on that side too.
Uh,
And I don't, well, I might get in trouble for admitting that, but we will also consider the agent who is representing that client. If I did a showing for two different clients or two different buyers and two different realtors, and this one realtor is just being real picky, calling out all sorts of things, and when the offers come in, it's exactly like completely identical, I'm going to choose the realtor that is going to be the least path of resistance. I'm
mhm.
not going to choose the one that's going to make my life and my seller's life a
Yeah.
living hell for the next 45 to 60 days, right? So I think this should be a lesson to all realtors out there too. Like, it's a very small island. You want to present yourself in the best light because you are a representative of your buyer. And if you're coming into a home and you're immediately just being like I guess for lack of a better word, a Karen, good luck getting your offer accepted, especially if the listing agent's there. They're not going to take your offer.
Yeah.
If the same offer comes along from somebody else who's just a better personality, super positive, they're going to take that realtor's offer. They're not going to take yours, you know?
Dude, that's why it's so good to have a realtor who's a shining citizen and good reputation.
Yeah,
Like it's
absolutely.
a people's game, right? Like
Really is.
it's all connection, it's all reputation, image. Will this realtor make me problems in the future? Because that's a long time to be in a contract together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's not to like even mention like just the buyer's representation agreement, because those can go on for a few years. But once you get into escrow, once you get the property under contract, you're looking at usually 45 days until you actually close on the home and you become the owner,
Yeah.
right? So you want to make sure that your realtor is just on top of it. They're maintaining really good communication and a really good relationship with the other side.
Word.
Yeah.
That's so good to know. That's why you need a realtor. Being on the outside of it for a while, they represent you. They're gonna fight for you, and basically, it's good to have that. We're always buying it unrepresented, but there's so many things that can like go over our heads because we're not represented and we're not like doing exact due diligence on the investment side.
Yeah, yeah.
Like maybe the seller's hiding something that we find out later. The agent's gonna, and they're legally supposed to disclose
Yeah,
everything. Like,
absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned that too. So for all our potential future buyers out there, the purchase contract is about 14 pages long in its most basic form. But that entire 14 pages is designed to protect you as the consumer. At every point in the escrow process through the entire purchase contract, there are contingencies in there which are designed to give you information, to empower you with that information so that you can make an educated decision,
yeah,
right? And everything that is provided, whether it's a disclosure form or condo docs, really anything about the home, inspection reports, and all that, there is an opportunity for you to review that information and to determine for yourself if, hey, is this a sound investment for me? If not, you can cancel. And there are ways to do that. And a good agent will be able to help you cancel if need be,
yeah.
right? But you have to know the purchase contract in and out. Yeah.
And dude, that's what's so important. So for example, there are some times where we look at land. Maybe there's a lava tube that the seller didn't close. That's the risk that not using an agent would have. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and just like all these disclosures, it really is protecting the consumer. And that's what I love about it. Like there's
Yeah.
so many ways. There's checkpoints where you can be like, do you like it? Yes, no. Then you like kind of
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
advance to the process.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, you can kind of see them as checkpoints because it really is just like a check-in. Like, hey, are you still good? Are we still in this house? We're going for it. I like that. Yeah, they
Yeah.
are checkpoints. So that kind of brings me to step number 4 is after you find the home, after you look at the houses and you determine, hey, we're gonna do this. Step number 4 is writing up the offer, and I guess subsequently like getting into escrow too. Again, work with a realtor that's going to custom tailor every contract to the specific home because everyone's situation is completely different, right? But once you write up a really good offer, a really good realtor is going to call up the listing agent and have a conversation with them. They're going to try to get information out of the listing agent
Hmm.
to give your offer an advantage, right? And this happens behind the scenes. Maybe people don't know this, but before I write up an offer for my client, I am on the phone with the other agent to get some kind of information. And most agents are going to be a little tight-lipped, but there are certain questions that I like to ask, which, depending on how the realtor responds, I can guess pretty close range of the kind of offers that they're getting and what they
Oh,
look like.
interesting.
And I can get it pretty accurate too. So I'll use that information to give my clients an advantage. And I think every good buyer's realtor out there should be doing that. If you don't see your agent hopping on the phone or giving you that kind of insider information, you probably need to get a different realtor. you know?
And it helps to be like really knowledgeable and like understanding the nuance of like certain words.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing to keep in mind too is usually I would say 99% of the time the listing agent is not going to be lying about stuff because if they lie or if they kind of exaggerate things a little too much, you they run the risk of scaring away the potential buyer. So
Oh,
really I wouldn't worry too much as a consumer of whether or not the listing agent is telling you accurate information. They should be.
yeah.
And we also, as realtors, because we are licensed, we owe a duty to the public to be honest. That's part of our code of ethics.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good. It's
yeah.
good to know.
But yeah, that's step number 4. It's writing up the offer and getting it accepted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you get accepted, the timeline is 45 to 60 days and then the due diligence, the inspections, and we can talk about this on another podcast, but there's so much. This whole
Yeah,
process is
there's a lot. So yeah, step number 5 is actually going through the escrow process, and we'll kind of cover that more in detail at a later podcast. But that entire escrow process, like Chris said, it goes anywhere from 45 to 60 days. Sometimes we might see 30-day closings depending how competitive it is for a certain property.
yeah.
But your typical closing is going to be about 45 days, and that's going to be the day that your offer gets accepted. 45 days after that is going to be the closing day, and that's going to be the day that you, as the buyer, will get the keys. You'll be the new homeowner of that home. Yeah.
That's
And that
awesome.
entire 45 days, again, is designed to empower you with information so that you can make a good financial decision for this home. A good piece of advice for our listeners out there: when you are in escrow, do not mess with your credit. Do not open any new credit cards. Do not buy a new car. Don't buy any furniture. Don't do anything until you get a call from your realtor saying, hey, congrats, we're closed. Do not touch that stuff. I
What
can speak from
happens?
experience. I had a client, and this is my first year of real estate. The lender, we were like a week away from closing, and my buyer had just moved to town and came from out of state actually. So he called up his lender and asked him, hey, are we good to go? Because I'm at the car dealer right now and we're getting this really sweet deal. I'm like, oh, crap. So I didn't know
Oh
about this
no.
conversation. So he actually went out and bought the car.
Oh, already.
Yeah, the lender gave him the okay. And this was a new lender too. So I think that was a kind of a bad thing there too. But the lender was like, oh, yeah, I think we should be fine. But the reason why you don't want to do that is because up until like final loan approval and even after that too, the lender's going to pull your credit again just to make sure that nothing changed with your credit. And because my client at the time took on additional debt, it messed with their DTI, their debt to income ratio,
Yeah.
which now made them not qualify for the home anymore
Oh no.
because of that car purchase. Luckily, I knew who the dealer was, so I convinced him to take the car back just for a week so that we could close on the
You
home.
knew them.
Yeah,
Wow.
luckily. So
Freaking.
we put out a major fire there. But yes, do not mess with your credit. Don't even open like a department store credit card. Like I know a lot of people like to go to Home Depot because they want to do like this, they want to fix up the home and everything. And Home Depot, they offer these like, oh, 0% financing for 12 months if you use their credit card. Do
Yeah.
not do it. Don't touch it. Wait until you close. Home Depot's not going anywhere.
Man.
Just don't touch your credit. Number one advice: don't do anything. Well, that's it. That
Yeah, that
situation. Sorry,
situation.
that was like a week before closing. Like
Oh
we were like
man.
ready to go. We got the final loan approval already too. So I think that's why too. Like my client thought, oh yeah, we should be good to go. I got approved for it already. We're ready. We're ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the case. But luckily we were able to save that, so we were okay.
That's good to know, man.
Yeah.
Did it have to be extended or the
I
closing
think
date?
we did extend it for like a couple of days. I think it was like a 3 or 4 day extension that we had to do for the
Not bad.
closing. Yeah, so it wasn't too crazy, but yeah, that was a really crazy transaction in my first year of real estate. Yeah, it was a huge learning experience too. Yeah, but it was great. I learned a lot from it, and I learned firsthand, don't mess with your credit.
You saved yourself with that. And
Yeah,
was anyone there to help you, or was that all by yourself?
I was kind of by myself,
Oh.
unfortunately. I hate to admit it. My first brokerage was not the best. you know, so I didn't really get as much support as I wanted. But it's okay. I
Yeah.
learned some hard lessons
Yeah.
and I'm better for it, so it's okay.
The best lessons are the one that hurt the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Luckily, we were able to avoid a lot of it and we saved it. But man, that was a big fire that we had to put out. Huge fire. Yeah.
Dang. So other than that, do you have any other pieces of advice for in this initial process, the things that we just went over, whether it
Um,
be the lending process or an escrow?
I think my number one advice is really just interview your agent. Um, like I said earlier, there are like 10,000 of us on the island. If you don't feel like your current realtor is a good fit for you, or if your communication styles are different, or if the vibes just aren't there,
Yeah.
it's okay to fire your realtor. And even as realtors too, like if my client is just acting up and we're like constantly fighting and we're like butting heads, I'm gonna fire you too,
Yeah.
right? I have enough stress as it is being a realtor. I don't need you to add to my stress too.
Yeah.
So if it's not gonna work out, hey, we'll part ways. It's totally fine. There's no hard feelings,
Yeah.
right? Time is such an important commodity. You can't get it back. So I'm not gonna waste my time. And you as a consumer, you certainly shouldn't waste your time either with a shitty realtor,
Yeah.
right? So, and I think also there are new realtors every single day, and Chris is going to be a new realtor too. And I would like to point out, like, it's totally fine to give the new realtor a chance to give them a shot, because everybody starts somewhere. But just know that new realtors will always have a principal broker or a broker in charge or like some sort of mentor looking out for them too. So it's okay to give the new guy a shot because at the end of the day, the contract is always going to be reviewed by someone with a lot more experience. So they're not going to be signing you up for some sort of like shitty deal or anything at the end of the day.
That's
So
good.
give them a shot. And the cool thing about working with a new realtor too is they have the time, they have the
Yeah.
energy because they're not super busy yet, right? They'll be able to go to every single showing with you, right?
Drive you around.
Yeah, they'll drive you around, they'll be present. Whereas if you're working with a really experienced realtor, sometimes you might end up just getting a team member versus the actual realtor that you wanted to
Oh,
work with too, right?
wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, my number one advice, I think, if you are looking to buy a house, interview your agents, talk to multiple agents before you commit.
That's awesome. So at the end of the day, it's just who you vibe with and who
Yeah.
can serve you the most. And I understand that it's a roller coaster of a process, like depending on the situation. But there are some emotions and some things that people go through.
Yeah,
You
for
ever
sure.
seen tears?
I have seen my fair share of tears. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, it's buying and selling. It is a very emotional process. I think for sellers, usually it's more of like a numbers thing. They kind of just look at the bottom line a little more. But If it's just like a home that's been in the family for generations and then they're selling it, then yeah, more emotions kind of come out of that too. Buyers especially, they do buy with a lot more emotion. So yeah, I've seen my fair share over my 10-year career of tears and fights, especially when there's family involved, especially when there's too many decision makers in the mix.
Oh,
There are a lot of conflicts sometimes, and it happens. And
yeah.
I think this is another hat that realtors kind of put on through the process too. We sort of become therapists
Oh,
at the same
yeah, I
time.
heard that.
Yeah, we're firefighters also. We put out fires all the time. We have to manage expectations, be the matchmaker. We are
S-
part-time tax
eh,
professionals. Yeah, financial planners. Like we have to know a little bit of everything to be a good realtor.
Somewhat of a friend.
Yeah, also friends too. Like eventually, like
That's funny.
I think that's another thing too. Like you have to make sure you're comfortable with your realtor because I like to tell this to my clients when I go through my buyer's presentations with them or consultations. It's like, look, if you're not comfortable with me, please don't use me, right?
Yeah.
Because we're gonna get real close. I'm gonna spend a lot of time with you. I'm basically gonna be your best friend,
Yeah.
right? And if you're not comfortable with me, like
Yeah.
in that way, because I'm gonna learn your finances, I'm gonna learn your hopes and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I might get a little bit into your family drama sometimes, right?
Oh,
I might hear about that.
yep.
And if you're not comfortable with me being that close to you, please do not hire me,
Yeah.
right? Because it's gonna be so much friction, so much conflict between the two of us that it's just not gonna be worth it.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, there's 10,000 of us out there. Find your tribe, find the vibe, and that's who you stick with.
So, emotional stability, level headedness, strategy. What's a good realtor? What makes a good realtor?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a great realtor is going to be one that's well connected because oftentimes it's going to come down to your relationship with the other agent
Yeah.
to make things happen, right? And because we're on a small island too, and I think it really goes double for Hawaii, right? You want to make sure you're good with everybody. You want to make sure you're not burning bridges. So find a realtor who's very well connected, very well liked, and find somebody who is actively doing transactions too, because you want somebody who is up to date with the current happenings of the market. You want somebody who's going to be prompt and attentive. But again, a really good realtor, they're going to be very busy. They have other clients, but as long as they're responding to you for like in a non-emergency within 24 hours, I think that's okay, right? I think also check with the communication style too. If you're a millennial, we like to text, right? But then if your realtor is calling you all the time, I get a lot of anxiety from picking up phone calls. Okay, so
Nowadays it's
yeah,
spam and
yeah,
like.
yeah. Like I don't, even as a realtor, I don't like calling. I prefer texting, right? But maybe you like emails only. Maybe you want to have a paper trail of everything, right? So, work with a realtor who's going to honor that and be respectful of that communication style too, right?
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
really good to know. That's a good place to kind of end off
yeah, I
our
like that.
episode 4 preset.